did you start? What were you thinking? What was ground zero for you? And, how did you go from there?
Ground zero was really absorbing everything that I could within a very short time frame. So today we go through a process called STAMP. So it's really in the winter months we start to develop what is it that we're going to be focusing on. And our fiscal year goes from April 1st to March 31st. So again, I was brought in January. We in the next 2 months needed to have a plan in place. So it was very much a drinking from that metaphoric fire hose. What is the strategy that we have? What is the business case that our leaders have defined for our business group, learning all of that, and very quickly within 6 weeks, kind of putting a plan in place. And I remember meeting weekly with our leadership team to show, hey, this is what we're planning to do based off of building awareness, building thought leadership, driving sales that we think will maximize the most from the events. And it was, here is the plan. We would get feedback. We'd have to go back to the drawing board, present it again, and once we got to a place, we then moved into that execution, and this was globally. So we were, in Ireland, in Singapore, going after these high level events that we could really maximize and allow for the most reach. And so it was back to your question, Matt, absorbing of what our business is doing, what's the strategy, and then aligning that to our pillars to maximize through events and ultimately pipeline and opportunity.
I think there's some good things that you said there that I just kind of want to repeat and hit on, right? One is the idea of a business case. The two is the idea of meeting weekly with leadership and presenting these ideas, right? Because, part of a business case is understanding what the business initiative, business's objectives, what are we trying to accomplish with this strategy, which is events, right? And then being able to build from there. I think you have buy-in from leadership, right? You're getting them to say, yes, no, what about this? Or, man, that's
Mhm.
awesome. Love it. You're creating that buy-in. It must have been so much easier having that to then go accelerate the program when you then say, okay, now it's time to go execute, because there's no question marks. You're not guessing, right? You've kind of done the work with the right people. So I just love the term business case that you use there.
Well, and that's really where, it was eye-opening. So you would think, yes, we have a good strategy in place. One of the first within a couple months of being in the position was, okay, I know what we're doing, but now I'm needing to understand who are the players. Because again, I sit
Mhm.
in a global position. We have to work with APAC, with EMEA, with Latin America, with North America. And so what we learned very quickly was this event may work for us at the worldwide level, but for the geo, it doesn't work for them. And so what we've had to kind of rewire our mindset is as we begin the planning for this year, one of the things that we are doing is, and part of the revamp process was, who are the players within each of the geo? How do we get with them and the country managers? Because again, we have the worldwide, we have then the geo, and then we have that country manager. And this is the case for all regions, but it just goes to the comment, and the point is that internal stakeholder, we need to align with them, and we need to
Mhm.
have this strategy be positioned as, here's how we're driving the bottom line for you. Here's what the success looks like. Here's how we collaborate. Because what we found in that first few months was we're providing an event that they haven't asked for. And so for us, it's here's an opportunity, but for them, it's one additional thing that they have to work on. And it's a barrier for them. And so that's kind of where we've, as a lessons learned, work to make sure that what we're doing, we have buy-in from the get-go with all the internal stakeholders.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. When it comes to the strategy of building out all of these events, deciding which ones to do, which ones not to do, which ones to make adjustments, right? Globally might be a lot. Maybe we just say nationally, right? Just to make it
Yeah.
simple. But like, what's kind of your criteria? How are you strategically looking at events? And I ask because I often ask people all the time, why do you go to this event? Why do you exhibit? Why do you sponsor? Why are you in a 40 by 40? Why are you in the, curious? And sometimes I'm shocked by some of the answers. So I'm curious that evaluation process for you, because I think that is the portfolio planning piece, which is really what that is a very strategic thing when it's done properly. So I'm curious how you evaluated that.
Yeah, so I'd say it's a number of different things, but at the core, it's really the knowing the target audience, who is our personas. For us, it's IT decision makers, it's CIOs. Knowing the target audience is then now how we look at these events, let's say nationally. I'm going to go after IT events with a certain number of individuals. And from there, the number of individuals we should expect to receive a number of certain marketing qualified leads from. So if
Yeah.
it's 12,000 individuals, we may target, okay, from that, 1,000 leads may come in. So that's kind of the target audience, the persona, going after the back to the conversation yesterday, knowing where the customer is going. So are they
Yeah.
going to the more industry events, middle events, and kind of lower? But then also for us, really, when we look at a sponsorship or prospectus, it's kind of it's three things. So it's speaking opportunity, it's booth, and then any additional like value drivers. So it might be a VIP lunch, it might be a workshop, but we are not looking at an event to just have a showcase. Because for me, if I have just a booth, I'm already setting myself up for failure. It has to have a very high touch point through speaking, through
Mm.
showcase, and then additional value drivers like a coffee bar that we did in Gartner or room drops. Last year we had an event where it was a 10 by 10 booth, very small. It was the Gartner IT Symposium last year where we had a 10 by 10 booth, and I was concerned because the comment I just made, we just have a booth. How are we going to set us up for success? How are people going to know? And so I kind of very quickly work with the team. Hey, this room drop is available. We can get people this high end item into the room, get them to the booth for additional conversations. So it's just kind of, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to have the biggest sponsorship, but it's tactically thinking what is going to be a splash for the company, and what are those additional value add things that we can package on to the overall sponsorship for us
Yeah.
to kind of make the splash a little bit bigger.
It's interesting the way you describe that. So I want to get your take on this. I'm gonna take us a little off topic here, but I think you
Yeah.
have a good take on this, which is so what I'm seeing now a lot is you have a younger generation, right? That's coming into being the buyers, being going to trade shows. And they're kind of like, what is this? Right? They're going to these conferences, they're not really sure. And in the day and age of social media, it is the attention grabbing is what's key.
Yep.
So I'm seeing people not exhibit, not sponsor, but go to the third party event where everybody is and leverage the fact that everybody is there. I saw a guy was at a couple events. He held up a cardboard sign that said something catchy, witty, and then made posts about it and got all these impressions and was talking like, I don't know what this did, but I got all these impressions. And I had to like really think about it. I'm like, man, is that what's going on here? Right. And I'm trying to, and the kind of conclusion I came to is like, all that stuff's great. Like, I think innovating and doing things differently and activating offsite, throwing a party, not exhibiting, whatever you want to do, I'm for that. But where I think they're missing is what you were just saying is simply, you're like, if we just have a booth, we're probably going to set ourselves up for failure. But if we have these other touch points and these other drivers and an area to do this and send someone here and meet them there, what you're really saying is, I want to meaningfully connect with my customer at this event. I want to have the best chance to meaningfully connect. And I think some of the stuff that people are doing, it can draw attention, it can seem creative, but they're not meaningfully connecting. And I think that relationship, that interpersonal at events that you are creating with these multiple touch points and speaking, you have a good person go up there and speak. You get one person that hears them right. It just kind of flows into the booth, into the sponsorship activation. So just curious your thoughts. I've been kind of working through that.
Oh yeah, I mean we can go off topic there. I mean, really what I'll start with is what we did at a previous event. So two events, because I'm always looking for those additional things that we can do. So
Yeah.
we sponsored a juice bar, we sponsored a coffee bar, these higher end things where it's a lead generation tactic. So you as an attendee have to scan your badge in order to receive
Mhm.
either a juice or coffee. But what we did with that was, okay, now what? They got the coffee, they got the
Yeah.
juice. How are we, to your point, meaningfully engaging with them? And so what we developed was an email campaign where it was F1 themed. It was, orange you glad you stopped by the juice bar, pun intended. It was just, how do we make this fun? How do we send an email right there and then? Because we'll get the information, deploy a very quick thanks for stopping by the juice bar, the coffee bar, so that we can just say, hey, We enjoy the conversation. While you're here, stop by the booth. Or when, the last day was over, we sorry that we couldn't see you. We're going to then now take it after. And how do we have additional conversations and meetings? And regarding the one thing I saw in Amsterdam, I was in Amsterdam 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago now at this point. So I was in the booth, but there was an attendee. They were trying to drum up business for these companies that were there. And so everyone that was a speaker at the conference, the company that they represented, they graphically printed on these skateboards the company logo. And they were going and selling to each of the exhibitors and saying, "Hey, we loved hearing you speak. Here's your Lenovo skateboard." And that was like, what is this for? And that got the conversation going, like, hey, well,
Yeah.
this is actually what we do. And for me, that was a very unique situation. Again, I'm not doing this, but as an exhibitor to an attendee, it was very cool for them to see. I'm not going to just hand you a business card. I'm going to hand you the skateboard with their company's logo on it. And
Mhm.
then that gets the conversation started and they kind of see a little bit more about what they are doing. So just
Yeah.
some kind of examples there.
Yeah, those little extras, those offsite activations, on-site activations, sponsorships, like how you get creative, I think really matters moving
Yeah,
forward because you are getting people to a city for 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days, and the booth is great. It's a hub, it's a place you should have
it's a connector.
engagement. Yeah, you should be ready for the people there and all the standard things, but how do you get to them outside of it, drive them more value? Like you said, where is your customer? They're there. What do they want while they're there? And what don't they want while they're there? You know?
Well, and that's where we even took it a step further where we have the top of funnel. How do we get from mid to lower? And so what we developed, and this is kind of what we talked about early on in the strategy, was what can we do as a additional incentive to get them off site? And so what we created were these lounges, just an informal area, but it's an opportunity for 20 to 30 VIPs. And again, the sales team is telling us, hey, these are the customers. So it's, the metaphor, we will build it and they will come. So
Mm.
we provided this opportunity to allow these individuals from that sales identified to come to have more of that conversation, get to know what Lenovo is doing. In New York, in January, we were at National Retail Federation event. So Lenovo Retail Solutions didn't know that was a thing. We showed up to showcase everything from self-service kiosks to signage. We had Hamilton that we brought in to perform. So private event, let's get 20 to 30 key customers in New York to join us outside of the event. They're
Yeah,
already attending NRF. How do we maximize people there versus
really cool.
trying to get people outside of that? So it just again to your point, creating these experiences that we're not just trying to have in the booth, but outside of it.
People remember experiences. They remember things that were done well. They remember things that resonated, that pulled on a string, that were just maybe just impressive, done right way, fun, emotional, whatever it may be. I think it's a great example.
What do you think is the biggest distinction when people say event planner, event marketer? What do you think the big difference is here?
The way I think of it is event planning, it's all about meticulously planning, organizing, and executing on every detail, where event marketing can be that. But in addition to that, it's really thinking about the full attendee journey, telling a brand story, analyzing the data that you're hopefully getting out of it, things that really move the needle on pipeline.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really like planning and logistics versus what you said, attendee journey, the pipeline. They are just two totally different things. And I think,
Completely different
something
things.
yeah, I mean, you and I, but they're both necessary. I think
Yeah.
part of the problem and where you and I kind of hit it off when we were talking about Exhibitor Live was the fact that because the logistics and the planning part is a necessity, like it's got to happen. If it doesn't happen or if it goes wrong, everything is going to shit and the marketing piece doesn't
Exactly.
really matter. So it takes precedent. And a lot
Yeah.
of people, inexperienced sometimes or don't have the skill set or the training, they get lost in it, right? Because it's so important and it's got to happen. Whereas the
Yeah.
marketing requires more strategy and more planning.
Yeah, it's the foundation. It's a foundation to a successful event. Just like building a home, you need to create the foundation first. yeah, if you don't have a foundation built, how can you do all the extras? And unfortunately, people do think of the marketing side of it as the extras. So you need to make sure the management of logistics is smooth as possible, that every single detail has been thought of. You can't really expect someone to have a positive experience, like an attendee to have a positive experience, if those things are not in place. I think it's so easy to get lost and focus on just the logistics because it is really critical. You only get one chance, and there is a lot at stake. You don't get second chances, unfortunately, to execute and produce an event.
At what point in your career do you think you sort of were able to stop focusing so heavily on logistics and planning and sort of be able to execute that well while thinking about the marketing, thinking about the attendee experience, thinking about your customers, either at a trade show booth or an event, and kind of how you're engaging them?
I think when I first started planning music festivals, it was very different from what I had done before. I was really focused on the marketing side of things. And just for me, like, we had to secure sponsors. And in order to do that, like, securing sponsors was incredibly important to their bottom line. And in order to secure sponsors, we had to do a lot of marketing campaigns. We had to create excitement and buzz around the talent in order to sell tickets. Because at the end of the day, at a show like that, a music festival, a concert, if you're not selling tickets, people aren't making money, and it's a failure. So creating buzz, and it was all about marketing that buzz to sell those tickets, was where I shifted things.
I think that's cool, because you saying that, it's kind of like, hey, I don't really have a choice here, right?
Yeah.
Where, I mean, and at the end of the day, events, trade shows, events, brand activations, festivals, wherever you want to label it, really at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they are there to produce revenue. They are there to produce
Exactly.
results. And that is the event marketer side of things. So it's a matter of kind of unlocking that. And what's something that you think you do really well on the planning side? What's something that you think maybe you've executed well, a trick of the trade, tip for somebody else? I mean, where do you think you're strong on the planning side?
I think my attention to detail, honestly, it helps me really excel in the planning process. So when my client shows up to an event, let's say, and things are going off without a hitch and things are seamless, or they seem seamless to the client, I get such an exhilarating feeling. Like, that's what I love, is like the whole production of all the time that you've put in, is the actual producing of the event. But I know that you can't do that without meticulously planning. And I think my advice for every event planner out there is putting an emphasis on project planning and management. Like, no detail can be overlooked. And if you're getting organized and really thoroughly planning out a project, that's my tip, because you can't fail. If you're planning every detail out and giving yourself the time to do that, then you really can't fail.
Attention to detail, one might say like, hey, oh, that's an obvious one. But I think it is obvious, but the importance of it is so heavy, because in events, like, you can't wing it. You can't just say, oh, it'll be okay. You can't not check, like, call the hotel and say, hey, what's the height of that? Or, hey, is that a bay door, or is that you got to make the calls and say, no, show me a picture. Tell me exactly, because that when you don't have those details locked in, it is detrimental and things can go off the rails really fast.
Yeah. And I think everybody has a different standard of attention to detail. And everybody has a different definition of a standard of definition of attention to detail. Being obsessive, I know people the people that have worked with me will be like, yeah, she's pretty obsessive. And it comes with the job. Like, in order to succeed, you have to be like obsessed with it. So anybody can say they have attention to detail. I think you really notice it in the end, how that happened. Was it seamless? Did you plan? Did you have risk management, like contingency plans? Like, did you take every step to plan a seamless event? I think there's a difference between that and just saying I pay attention to detail and just doing the bare minimum.
Agreed. What about on the marketing side? What about in the experience, trying to execute a strategy, engage your customer, right? Deliver that experience that's like memorable. engaging, right? Immersive. What about on that side, like the event marketer side? Where do you think you're strong? What have you done, what have you done well?
I think really thinking through the attendees' journey, like what do you really want them to experience? Because without that, you can just say, I have all these ideas and I'm going to execute on all these different things and all these brand activations. But if you're not really thinking through the journey and putting yourself in their shoes and thinking from their perspective, once you do that, you can work backwards and really create an immersive plan and what that would look like, right? So I think something that I do well is I'm really able to understand the end result and what I want them to experience and feel and walk away with. From there, planning the different experiences you want. Maybe you want an activation, maybe you want a demonstration, like maybe you want a podcast at your event. You think it through.
How do you go about that? Because I love what you're saying, right? Like you're saying, I'm thinking about their journey. So whether it's when they walk into my event, walk into my festival, walk into my trade show booth, I'm putting myself in their shoes. And essentially you're kind of like saying like begin with the end in mind, right? Which
Absolutely.
is something. So
which is the objective, right? Like what's your objective? And then planning from there. Like for me, I think what's really important is taking time to do research. And oftentimes we're so busy. Most of us don't plan one event at a time. We're planning so many things, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed where you do cut back on things such as research. But I think that's critical. Researching the events that you're doing, researching the experience you want attendees to feel, and then how to create that. I'm a big fan of brainstorming. So once you've done your research, brainstorm a bunch of ideas. You don't have to execute on every single one, but really taking that time to research everything you can. That's how you're really going to understand what you want them to leave away feeling.
Yeah. So you're kind of building a foundation to create ideas or to understand where you're going from, right? You're kind of thinking about your customer, thinking about their journey, thinking about who they are, why they're there. And then you're sort of saying like, okay, let's try to deliver them something that at least makes sense for them.
Yeah, something that makes sense for them and for the business, right? Like you got to think about it both ways. Like, okay, these are the things that we want them to feel when they leave, but ultimately we need to make a sale. Like ultimately we want them to remember our brand. Like what is that going to look like for us?
I love what you just said there, how we want them, how we want to make them feel, right? That is a question that we have rolled into a little bit of our discovery and sort of like experiential design process with our customers, is saying, how do you want someone to feel after they leave your trade show booth, after they leave your event, after they leave your brand activation? And it's interesting, the responses that you get from people. Some people are like, never thought of it. I have no idea what I want someone to feel. Some people are like, man, that's a great question. And they'll tell you, but then it opens up such a meaningful conversation as to what then the engagement, the activation, the experience looks like, because it gets people thinking about their customer. I love that.
Exactly.
It's a good thought. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how you start creating the experiential side of things, right? It's not just going through a checklist, making sure you have everything, logistics and then yes, I've thought about the promotion, so it's the marketing, how to get people to the show. That's all great too. But then I think there's a third part to the job, is the creating experiences, right? Like that's the experiential side of marketing. That's critical. You see now that people, like consumers and attendees, they're making their decisions based on an emotion that they felt, positive or negative. Like it's not always going to be positive. So how many times have you gone to a concert and remembered it a few years later, or 10 years, even a decade later? Like how often? It's things that trigger that experience that makes it unforgettable. So I want to create these memorable experiences where I'm evoking an emotion in somebody. And in 6 months, when the show ends or the product launch is launched, what's going to make them remember me and our brand 6 months down the road, a year down the road, when they are making those buying decisions, right?
Yeah, that's such a good point, right? Because I think sometimes when people hear like experiential marketing, or they think like immersive, engaging, experience, these words thrown. People are like, oh, that's a bunch of like foofy bullshit, or that's blah, blah, blah. And what I've had those conversations with people where they tell me that, and I'll go back to them and I'll say, hey, like, let's talk about an experience that you've had that you remember, right? Like, tell me something, a trip you went on, you know, you could, a hotel you visited, an experience dining at a restaurant, everybody that, and like, people don't understand what you're getting at here with this feeling is when you can create a feeling, it does get remembered. It then becomes an experience. So yeah, it's tricky to do. It's not easy, but you need to be striving and aiming for it all the time.
Yeah, you may not get it 100% of the time or with 100% of the attendees, but I don't think that should be the goal. It should be the goal to get to as many people as you can, to have them leave with a positive experience, positive impression of your brand, and then nurture that. It can't just be one event and then you forget about those attendees. Like, how are you going to nurture them? The research shows that consumers need, I think, between 6 to 8 touch points of a brand before they even make a decision. So it can't just be a one-time thing. You need to nurture that.
And what you said about, just made me think of it. You said positive experience, right? So people having these positive experiences. There's actually technology and cameras now where you can install them into your exhibits at your events, and it will gauge like how happy or how positive of an experience a person is having that is in your space for a set period of time. So, you know, if you're doing multiple shows, activations, events, whatever it may be, you can pop these cameras in there and it will tell you like which demographic you're resonating with: men, women, older, younger, who's happy, who's not, who stopped, who left, who passed by. And it gives you the vibe. Like, if you don't have a very positive, delighted type of experience, you know, it's like 30% of people, well, you probably haven't put a good enough experience out there for people.
Exactly. And that goes back to the data analysis. Like, you need that touch point, you need those answers basically to be able to plan better marketing programs, I think.
So one of my favorite examples of a science-based solution is about feedback. So this is a big challenge for event organizers. When we create event, we want some feedback about it, right? So a lot of the times it's a challenge to get the high quality feedback and to actually get the great response rate. So how do we go around it? Usually event organizers offer incentives, for example, and usually they don't work because, you know, if you offer, like, it's usually monetary incentives like a $5 Amazon card, right? Or even if it's like $100 Amazon card, people don't care, because actually, if you think about it, their time is more valuable. This is what they think about their time. So they just don't have time and don't have motivation to complete that feedback form. Now, there was research done a few years ago about using the word advice instead of feedback. So instead of asking for feedback, if you ask for advice about your event, and that was confirmed in the research experiments, people are more likely to respond. So there was a high response rate and there was a high quality feedback in that research. So now that's the practical implication for event planners. You know, if you ask not for feedback, but for advice, you're more likely to receive what you want from people. Now, event planners that I worked with who implemented this recommendation also reported high quality feedback. And that's one of my favorite examples, again, just because it shows how simple those science-based solutions can be. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require any other resources. You just change one word and the outcomes are much better.
What a good example, right?
It is.
Feedback is something that, you know, we work with corporate event marketers on their trade shows, their events, their brand activations, right? And feedback is something that they are always looking for, from like a brand awareness score to how did we do? What did you think of the experience? So very interesting how language and the way you say something can change response. I mean, that is so simple, it's stupid. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it
It's
is
so
ridiculous.
simple.
Yeah, I know.
You're just
I
changing
know.
one word, but you're doing
Exactly.
everything the same. So just think about like even applying further things to that and maybe sort of the progress that you could get. When you say like science-based solutions, right? That's a good example. What challenges at events do you think can be solved with more psychological science-based solutions, you know, for event organizers, for event hosts and event marketers
Mhm.
that are running very big events with, I mean, I don't care if it's 75 intimate people or it's a 1,000, right?
Absolutely. No, it doesn't matter. And I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration from me to say that basically every single challenge that you face when you plan an event can be solved and can be approached from this perspective, from behavioral science perspective. Because again, it's all about people, right? So whether it's about engagement, whether it's about survey response rate, or whether it's about effectiveness of the learning program, every basic element of the event design can be approached by behavioral lens. You know,
How about signups? I mean, that feels to me like just from talking to event marketers, right? Like they have stakeholders they're going back to, CMO, CFO, CEO, right? Their executive team. If they're going to throw a big event, they want numbers. I mean, that's the end of the day, they want numbers. So, you know, how do you get sign up? Is there, I don't want to say a hack because that term has absolutely just been stepped over, rolled over, but what are the ways with a behavioral science or psychology to maybe be able to get more signups?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned hacks, because that's not the way how to apply event psychology. And a lot of people do this mistake and they think that, oh, if we get this little hack applied, that's going to solve our problem. But in fact, you need to understand and apply it in a cohesive way, in a comprehensive way. So as a system, you cannot really just use it as patches, you know, to solve some specific issue that you're facing right now, but rather you need to understand that you are dealing with humans, and humans have some rules by which they work. You know, for example, if we are talking
what are
about
those rules? Yeah, what are those rules?
yeah,
I want to
if
know
we are
those.
talking about sign-ups, so we are talking really about motivation and about getting attention. So we are talking about not the actual numbers in the beginning, at least. You know, you need to understand the core behind it, right? What are the psychological mechanisms that drive people's motivation? So for example, if we are talking about sign up, maybe you need to go back and talk to your audience or explore your audience to understand them better, and what kind of things that are universal to human beings drive that decision to sign up to your event. Maybe they want to feel special. And that's one of the core, again, psychological mechanisms that drive a lot of our decisions. We want to feel special. So maybe you can suggest something that make them feel special, and that will drive their decision to attend. You know what I mean? So those are sort of systematic changes that you need to apply based on what we know about human beings. So sense of belonging again. Do I feel like I'm the part of that event? What kind of things have been done before by the event organizers to make people feel like they are part of this event? They belong to it, right? So those kind of things we just start talking about, but in fact, they've always been there, right? So it's just that you need to catch up and pick up on those things, universal core mechanisms. And then if you start from that place, then you will be able to create some solutions, practical solutions that work for your event, for your audience.
We talked a while back about the principles of behavioral psychology. Can you walk us through kind of the principles of it?
Right. I believe you referred to one of the posts that I recently shared about, you know, like 5 basic principles, right, of the behavioral.
I think it was the 5 back North Stars to guide your event success, right? And
exactly.
that rolled into principles.
I created that post just because I realized that people lack the information about some basic fundamental principles from behavioral science that we can use in event planning, in event design. And so let's talk about them one by one, right? first is humans are cognitive misers. And by that, I mean that we as humans, we hate any cognitive effort. So basically, whenever we face some information overload or something that we need to apply cognitive effort to, we just hate it. We always choose an easy way to go around something. And then the practical implication from that is that you need to make things simple for people. If you want them to act on something, you need to make it simple. And a great example that we all know about in advance is registration. So if you want people to register, don't throw like 5 pages long registration at them, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're not
You lose
going
me.
to do that. Exactly, right? So
I have no attention span.
I always like share this example. I was trying to register for the industry event. It was online. It was back in the pandemic times. And the registration asked me about my county, like not country, county. Why on earth do you need to know my county when I'm trying to register? Eventually I abandoned the registration, and I'm sure I wasn't alone. So if you need people to register, if you need those signups, you need to make it simple. I understand that you may need some information about those people, right? But you can ask that afterwards. And that's a simple solution, right? So make it simple. It's number one.
I love the make it simple thing. It resonates with me, especially recently. I listened to a podcast with Brian Chesky on it. He's the CEO of Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how he obsesses over details and he obsesses over simplicity. Yeah. And the two, although they kind of mesh together, but he was talking about how they built Airbnb and the platform and the website. And he just wants the user experience to be so easy and so simple. And I mean, he went on about it for 20 minutes and I was blown away with like how focused he was on that. But he has the idea that people want simple. They want easy. They don't want difficult. They have enough going on in their lives. So I think that's a great first principle.
Well, exactly. And, you know, there was some time ago, I came across these stats that people make about 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000 decisions. That's a crazy number. And even if like a bit less, you know, it's still, you know, it's crazy. So you can't really expect people to sit quietly and register for 15 minutes for your event. They have some other things going on in their lives, important enough, that compete with your event, right? All the time. Yeah. So you cannot really afford this. You need to make it simple. Whatever the decision is that you expect from your attendees, you need to make it simple. That's the first one. The second one was, I think, about senses. So senses shape experiences. And obviously, you know, all that is happening in the world around us, we perceive the world around us through our senses. And I think now, especially at industry events, I see more attention being paid to this topic, but still, you know, it's not enough. We need to work more to engage senses, to understand how they work. And a lot of findings from neuroscience research can help with that. And so the first and easy thing to do to start with about senses is just to engage more senses when you design an event. And that means that we put a lot of focus onto vision, you know, to wow attendees with, you know, some colors, with some bright lights and stuff like that. But in fact, what science teaches us that the more senses are involved, the better, because there is this cross-sensory connection. And if we eat some meal, for example, it's not that only taste is engaged. We eat with our eyes, you know, that's one of the examples to show that cross-sensory connection is important. So if you involve senses other than vision, when you create some activation, some experiences within the event, that's gonna boost the level of engagement. That's gonna help your attendees learn more and more efficiently, and so on. So senses are really important. That's number two.
Makes me think of smell. Smell to me is something that is so underused and underrated. I always remember, maybe it's me, maybe it's just a biased opinion, but I always remember certain smells. at certain
Yes.
places. When it's a distinct, it catches me, right? A hotel, a car dealership, whatever. I'm like, I always remember it for some reason.
Yes.
So I think it can shape an experience, like you're saying.
A lot of businesses from hospitality, from retail use that. And it's not you. I mean, sense of smell is considered by scientists as one of the strongest, most powerful senses that influences our memories. And so that's exactly what we need in events, right? So sounds as well. Music is so powerful. It affects our learning, it affects our mood, it affects our well-being. So all those kind of things can be improved just by using music, sounds. I'm sure you've heard about sound logos, like Netflix uses sound logo. It's to them that sound, right? And you immediately
Gotcha.
understand that this is Netflix. It's not something else.
Yes.
So
Gotcha.
the
Yes.
same can be used in events for event branding.
Yeah.
And you can
That's
use,
interesting.
you can even use a signature tune for your event. And that's a powerful way to remind your attendees about the event. That's part of your event branding. So it's not just the logos and colors, but also sounds. And that's another way to
that logo,
yeah.
that sound logo thing that you're talking about, it took me a minute to catch on to it, but it's interesting. A lot of like TV movie companies have done a good job of showing you a logo and then having some sound that comes with it, right?
Yes.
And you know the sound, you know the entrance, you know it's not music,
No,
it's a sound.
it's not. No,
And
it's just
and it
sound.
catches you. Very interesting. The third I love. Let's go to number 3. Humans are irrational. What a fact. What a absolute fact.
That's
We are
one of my
difficult and
favorites.
irrational.
Well, we all are irrational. Our decisions are driven by our subconscious thoughts and emotions in most cases. Did you know this fact? I just read it recently that people refuse to drink from bottles if they are labeled poisonous, even if they know that the label is false. That's just a fun fact, you know, about how irrational we can be. Or another fact from retail, there was an experiment done about drinking from different wine bottles. So they were labeled, you know, they have different prices, like $5 wine, $10, $35, $45, $90 wine. And then people were asked about the experience, how they like those wines. And as you can imagine, the worst was the $5 wine, and the $90 wine was the best in their opinion. But what researchers did, they switched the labels. And so in fact, there was only like 3 bottles of wine, and the one that was labeled $5 wine was actually $45 wine. So long story short, when they did the blind test afterwards, they revealed that in fact, the labels influence the satisfaction, the taste, the enjoyment. That's crazy, right? So that just shows, and that's one of the many examples. And you touch upon a little bit on the 4th principle that I shared about diversity, because that's also about diversity, not only emotions, but diversity. So if you enjoy your evenings, and I may be the one that actually prefer to step out and just be somewhere in the quiet space, right? So events need to create experiences for different types of people, right? And so that's the 4th principle that I share, that
diversity drives enrichment.
Enrichment, absolutely. And that's about,
I love that.
So what we've done a good job about so far is understanding the demographic diversity, meaning, you know, race, gender, age, things like that. But that's demographic diversity. And there are other types of diversity that should be taken care of. For example, emotional diversity. You know, we usually create events and we expect it to be all about positive things. And that's fine. I mean, obviously, we as human beings, we want our lives to be, you know, more positive than negative, right? But we need to understand that there is a range of emotions that people feel, not only about the event, but in connection to those topics that, you know, to those themes that are at the core of the event, right? And so we need to acknowledge that and offer something that would recognize other types of emotions. For example, you can add a session about failures. I'm just thinking about industry events, right? You know, why not? You can add, if it's like a parenting conference, right? You can suggest some topics that are not about how to improve or how to be positive or how to find some solutions, but just about sharing what kind of difficult things they've been through. Whatever that might be, just, you know, I'm just thinking out loud right now, but basically you need to tackle different emotions and understand that people may appreciate that as well. It's not only about all the positive and, you know, rainbows and stuff. It can be about some negative emotions as well. So that's just about emotional diversity, but we've got neurodiversity as well. And that's what you've just mentioned about, you know, different activities at the event that can be offered to different types of attendees who appreciate different things. Some might prefer parties and after hours networking sessions, and some may prefer, you know, just sitting quiet in the corner and reflecting on their experience. So those things should be present for people to enjoy different things.
Agreed. What's the fifth? It's psychological value is greater than economical value.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. And I think what you mentioned about, you know, that episode with shoes that you just shared, that was partly about psychological value. And another great example would be, you know, an iPhone. When it came out first, and actually throughout the years as well, somehow the owners of iPhone are perceived as those are more smart people, more like sophisticated. I don't know. I mean, it has this status which cannot be explained by the physical characteristics, because, you know, in some ways, iPhone features might be less interesting or less efficient than, you know, with other phones. But the status that they achieved was through psychological value. So people who own specific products, let's say it's shoes from a specific brand or, you know, an iPhone, whatever that is, they feel like they're special. They are better in some ways or smarter than other people. And that's the psychological value, because it is based on, again, some universal old human desires and psychological motivations. Right. And so you can achieve that with your event as well, if you, again, think about what's behind the reason to attend. Because if you know that behind that reason to attend is people who want to feel special, who want that, you know, let me put it another way. So when people attend a specific event, they might feel like they're special because they may brag about that event. They may say like, oh, I've been there, and that means, that signals to their network that in some ways they are special, they are more professional, they are more interesting. So it gives them some status. So when you create an event that provides people with some extra value, you create psychological value. So it's not about how much money I spend on that event, but rather what it says about me if I attend this event.
Yeah, understood. I'll recap them for everybody real quick. First one is make it simple. The second is senses shape experiences. Third is that humans are irrational, right? So obviously the idea of emotion. The fourth is that diversity drives enrichment. And the fifth is that psychological value is greater than economic value.
Absolutely.